Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. At this time, please turn off all electronic devices. Please refrain from using flash photography during the program. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Heybusch, and I have the honor of being the Executive Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. Thank you all for joining us this evening. In honor of our men and women in uniform who protect us and defend our freedom around the world, if you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Before we get started this evening, there are a few people in the audience I'd like to recognize, and I'd like to start with Secretary Pompeo's wife, Susan Pompeo. Susan, thank you for coming. Of course, former Congressman Elton Gallegly and his wife, Janice. Elton. Elton represented the Reagan Library for 26 years in Congress. Assemblywoman Suzette Valladares of California's 38th District. Her district includes the Reagan Library. And we have with us tonight 3 trustees of the Reagan Foundation's board. I'll start with former Governor of California, Pete Wilson, and his wife, Gail. Andrew Littlefair, his wife, Karen, and their son, James. Andrew, Karen. Andrew served as the head of President Reagan's advance team. Finally, it's my great honor to introduce a trustee of ours who has lent his remarkable talents gained in the world of marketing on a global scale to the Reagan Foundation. He's one of the originators of our Time for Choosing program and a key force who has made this evening possible. He'll be introducing our special guest tonight. If you would, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Ben Sutton.
Good evening, everyone. How many of you have asked Governor Wilson if he might run? As soon as I saw him in the parking lot, I was like, Governor Wilson, it's great to see you. You going to run? I brought my checkbook. Good evening and welcome to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. It is a true joy to be here tonight and to welcome you here live and in person. If this is your first time to be with us, you've chosen a great evening for your inaugural visit. If you're a regular, it's great to have you back. All I know is, Elton, you're here every time I'm here. So thank you for opening and closing every day. Our speaker this evening would indeed qualify as a regular around here. He's a friend and frequent speaker at Reagan Foundation events. As CIA Director in 2017, he joined us for a one-on-one interview during the Reagan National Defense Forum. As Secretary of State almost 3 years ago in 2018, he delivered remarks during a Reagan Forum in which he laid out the Trump administration's strategy on Iran. And do you remember that? It was great. In 2019, on a trip I was privileged to make with my son, with Secretary Pompeo, he helped us unveil a statue of President Reagan on the grounds of the United States Embassy in Berlin as we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And as a point of personal privilege, last year, Secretary Pompeo was kind enough to dedicate the auditorium that bears my family's name at the New Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C., launching our Center for Freedom and Democracy there. I'm actually starting to think you might like us. Seriously, we're honored to have welcomed and hosted the Secretary for so many milestone events in the life of this foundation and library, but tonight may be his most closely watched speech yet at the Reagan Library. That's because tonight is not just about celebrating the past or assessing the present moment. It's about the future of the Republican Party and this country and the type of leadership we need. This is the third event in our Time for Choosing series at the Reagan Foundation. Our series takes its name from that transformative 1964 speech that launched Ronald Reagan's political career and transformed a movement and this party. It's a speech so consequential in the life of our 40th president that it's simply known as the speech. 57 years later, President Reagan's party is facing another time for choosing. What will it stand for? What policies should it pursue? Are there philosophies and common ground upon which we can all agree? Can it offer an optimistic vision for our country? Now, these are questions that we've put to all of our invited guests in this speaker series, including Speaker Paul Ryan and Vice President Pence, who joined us earlier this year, as well as many more individuals who are scheduled to speak in this series. All of them are leading voices in the Republican Party. This is a forum for reasoned intellectual discussion, not slogans or sound bites. And as I said before, we're not looking to go back to the past or ask, what would Reagan do? Not at all. President Reagan was perhaps the most forward-looking of all the presidents in the history of the United States. So if we're truly upholding his legacy, our next generation of leaders must be forward-looking too. So, Mr. Secretary, we've asked the hard questions. Now we hope you have the answers. But for this former diplomat, lawyer, cavalry officer who graduated at the top of his class at West Point and once patrolled the Iron Curtain, Mr. Secretary, you've confronted far more difficult challenges, so we know that you're up to the task. Thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and give a warm welcome to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. It is awesome to be back here. But it always concerns me when people applaud that much before I speak. So we'll see how you feel afterwards. Ben, thank you for those kind words. I'm standing in front of a sign that's about Reagan's famous speech. I have to tell you, for someone like me, it is so deeply humbling. Bless you all for giving me this incredible opportunity. Honored guests and friends, to be in this place, to be at the Reagan Library and Museum is a rare honor, and I know that. For within this incredible structure lies the soul of one of the world's greatest statesmen, this marvelous venue. My wife and I were talking about this tonight as we walked in. I will speak from my heart. I'm no longer a diplomat, so it's Mike Pompeo unplugged. But I'll do it from my heart because this is a resting place of one of my heroes. A man who, with his beloved wife Nancy, chose this place. The American family, the faith we have in God and our country, and the hard work fused with moral courage and introspection built our nation into the greatest force for good the world has ever known. But as been suggested, it's a different time, and unless we act now to assert faith and morality, our nation cannot and will not be strong. And as I saw as America's 70th Secretary of State, if America is not strong, the world will be at the mercy of tyrants and enter an era we dare not imagine. I am forever grateful I came of age to serve my country during the Reagan presidency. He was my commander-in-chief when I was at West Point. Now, 4 decades ago, before I even got my appointment, I grew up not too far south of here in Santa Ana. I studied the life of my future commander-in-chief. I had no idea. But he came even then to define my conception and that of my entire class of what it means to be truly American. That's what I want to talk about tonight as we think about how our party moves forward. Because though Ronald Reagan oversaw the rebuilding of America's military, he did so. He did so in order that our nation would maintain peace through strength. It was always about peace. Our 40th president hated war. He thus set an indelible standard that graduates of my academy, West Point, must always be soldiers of peace. It reminded me of a story. I was competing for a graduate scholarship. I came back to California for an interview. I was asked by the chairman of the Board of Regents of the University of California why there was no Peace Academy. It was not a kind question. I was very nervous in this interview, but I answered. I said, well, that's the school I go to. There were these 5 institutions, West Point, the Naval Academy, Air Force, and those of the Coast Guard and Merchant Marine, all aimed singularly at achieving peace. Indeed, our profession was one of peace. In January of 2021, I was on the other end of my time in government service. I designated Cuba as the state sponsor of terrorism. It was the right thing to do. It promoted freedom and peace, and all people we all need to support their effort to enjoy the liberty and freedom which we have. Every one of us who loves freedom stands with those sons and daughters of Cuba who simply seek to be outside of the tyranny of the Cuban regime and despots. May God bless them in their fight, and may we all stand with them. So when I was elected to Congress, and then made the director of the CIA, and then later confirmed as the Secretary of State, my thoughts concerning the challenges that I would face always placed before me President Reagan's image, for he truly exemplified a joyous nobility of spirit without which no leader can command. He was, of course, known for his incompatible humor. I remember the story of when he had a phone call with the Soviet head of state, and he said to his staff, he said, "We've made a breakthrough with the proposal of rid nuclear weapons from the world." He said, "General Secretary Andropov agreed to meet us halfway. He agreed to take our side to zero." I had the same conversation with President Putin. But I remember, too, that Reagan persevered in that conversation for peace. His vision for a strategic arms treaty led to the elimination of massive numbers of nuclear weapons by both countries, and ultimately the treaty's ratification in the United States Senate. His vision backed by crippling sanctions on the Soviet economy and its planned natural gas pipeline to the West, caused the empire's ultimate dissolution and military concessions that otherwise would have been inconceivable. President Reagan's statecraft informed my work, and that I did alongside President Trump to curtail Iran's nuclear program. The model, look, it also provided a template for our actions to contain Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, what we've accomplished has been cast aside by the deep state in Washington in just 6 short months. In their backdoor negotiations with Iran and their elimination of the sanctions to inhibit Russia from supplying natural gas to Germany, they've put our world at risk. It's weakness, and weakness begets war. You know, Ben suggested this isn't about thinking about what President Reagan would do if he was faced with the world of today, when we're so divided. But I hearken back to him for inspiration. And while I do not pretend to have the complete answer, I do believe I know the path the giant would chart. For it would begin with faith, something Ronald Reagan talked about and believed in. Faith has, too, been my strength and that of my wife, Susan. Susan and I know that without God's grace, it is immensely difficult to lead. For a soldier to lead his brothers and sisters into battle without faith is almost impossible, for the sacrifices that may be demanded exceed any recompense that one might receive in this world. To those serving in harm's way, it is the certain knowledge of everlasting life after this existence that conveys undaunted courage to the weary and implacable resolve to the reticence of some. Indeed, it is faith that imbues fearlessness. You'll know this. This is the truth George Washington understood when he commanded a force of farmers, hunters, merchants to victory over the greatest army and navy that the world had at that time known. This is the very wisdom that President Reagan expressed when he defeated the undefeatable evil empire of the Soviet Union. You'll recall he did that without war, but with a heart absolutely full of faith. We all should draw on these immortal examples if we're to meet the grave challenges that now face our country and if we're to lead our party forward. To reclaim America, which I believe only our party can do, there is literally no more important resource than our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, and temples that grace all of this United States of America. There is no more important need, none, than to hear their voices when they state that we must return to our moral core, lest all be lost. If we do not restore our character, its leadership, and its exceptionalism, trouble lies ahead. The enunciation of faith is absolutely paramount. Our proclamation within the halls of power that God's relationship is with the individual and not the collective is at the center of the American dream. Fellowship and mutual respect are born from this realization. From our spirits are the creation of God, and what is God's must never be disrespected, no matter our station in life, no matter our accomplishments in life. And as conservatives, we as conservatives need to communicate our belief that everyone is endowed with the dignity that must be respected, because we all bear the mark of our Creator. This idea is the means to bring our divided country together, without hatred and without acrimony. It's also an idea that the statists reject. This is their Achilles heel, and it is revealed by the actions of privileged elites who applaud what they themselves would simply not do, as they use and take advantage of those they pretend to support. This is why true conservatism in America declined after the Reagan presidency. The administration of which I was a part brought grit, we brought populism, and a disruptive innovation to revive conservative principles. I'm proud to have helped President Trump destroy ISIS and its leadership. In doing so, we fulfilled my highest calling as the Secretary of State. I made sure our young men and women would be placed in harm's way with less intensity and with less frequency, and I am confident that we saved innumerable lives, American and other, and ended undurable suffering. I'm proud too of the work we did. I spoke about this on this stage before. We terminated the Joint Comprehensive Plan in Action, the silly Iran nuclear deal that would have aided this terrorist nation to amass the resources to build a nuclear weapon. We should never forget the purpose that those weapons were being built, is to destroy the United States and, of course, the little Satan, Israel. I'm proud that we took decisive action to end the reign of terror of Qasem Soleimani, who was headed Iran's murderous Quds force. And much like Reagan's sanctions of the regime of the Soviet Union, we put sanctions on the Iranian regime. And we made a real movement to gain freedom for the Iranian people. I'm proud too that we moved our embassy, the American embassy in Israel, to Jerusalem. Too many presidents had taken a pass. We were prepared to break glass to secure American freedom and to make friends with great nations around the world. This is what our party must continue to do. This demonstration of resolve and unalterable support for Israel encouraged 4 Muslim-majority nations to make a real peace with the Jewish state. In March of last year, I spoke at some length at another presidential library, not too far from here, talking about how our administration was the first to stare down China, to hold them to account for the Wuhan virus, for that tyrannical regime's orchestrated cover-up that poisoned the world and killed millions, and China's ongoing theft of American technology and prosperity, and most critically, millions of American jobs. Every nation's history is made one decision at a time. Throughout our administration, domestic and foreign policy changes were numerous. The left seized upon the president's presentation, his style, to disrupt his term and to thwart his chances for re-election. Look, since the end of World War II, America has made many correct decisions, bringing democratic institutions to former enemies, and unending, unprecedented economic security to much of the world. We averted global nuclear war, but we've also faltered. Too many times, we've forgotten that our greatest gift to other nations is the American example. It's not the force of arms. At home, we've tarnished our institutions and have compromised our belief in limited government and the necessity for a separation of powers. You all know this. We see it every day. We've allowed our courts to legislate. We've allowed the executive to dictate, and we've allowed Congress to exceed its bounds of constitutional authorities. Today, in America's biggest cities, in San Francisco and Chicago, and New York, and especially in Washington, these cities symbolize a dysfunction that is grasped by friends and our adversaries too. We can't paper over this crisis. Our party must never do that. We have an absolute obligation to our children. We have an obligation to our children to restore what we've lost. In studying our history to map our future, we as a movement, we as a party, must reintroduce our nation to conservatism, something I've been in the fight for, well, too many decades now. Today, all of us stand upon a promontory from which we survey our nation's history, the good, the bad, the fair, and frankly, the unjust. We don't shrink away from any of it, not a single aspect, not any part of our history, nor are we ashamed, because we have overcome, we have prevailed, and we have forsworn that which is corruptive of America's most relevant ideals. You talked about optimism going forward. You should know I'm long America. Joy and hope must transcend our nation's present deterioration and discord, and we can do it. Our party can lead the way. And it's with this understanding for our past that we must openly understand and profess our faith, our devotion to families, and proclaim unapologetically the words that I'm an American. Now this next task is easier said and hard to do, and I have been imperfect. My wife describes me as authentic Christian. We must not look upon our opponents in anger, for it is oblative to virtue and corrosive to our judgment. It was James Madison, the father of our founding document, our Constitution, believed that both openness and boldness, but not rancor, were vital for American leadership. President Lincoln described it this way: he did not look upon his many adversaries and detractors in fury, but in righteousness. For it was in righteousness that King David thanked a loving God who fortified and enabled him. Psalm 41:12 recites David's gratitude. It says, "Because of my integrity, you uphold me and set me in your presence forever." You know, today many elected officials publicly state that integrity is priceless. Maybe that's why so few of them have bought so much. Virtues. Virtues are developed. They're developed through God's grace and are the foundation of our republic and all of human happiness. It was Frederick Douglass who stated that the life of the nation is secure only while the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous. He went on to say these words again. He gave these words again on the occasion of the 23rd anniversary of the emancipation of the District of Columbia. Indeed, I do not believe that any truer words have ever been spoken. The antidote to strife is virtue. America's virtues are not represented by our wealth. Our virtues are our wealth. America is strongest when we act according to our founding documents, which faith has imbued. We are the weakest when we disregard that absolutely priceless heritage. I want to talk today about 4 virtues. There are many. I believe these virtues define conservatism and must define our party as we move it forward. For it is these qualities that will permit our nation to vanquish threats of unparalleled scope and danger, which include internal collapse, China's reach, terrorism fueled from the Islamic regime in Iran, and new risks that we're frankly just now beginning to understand. The first virtue is vision. What is often most difficult to envision is that's right in front of us, the things we see. It's right before our gaze. Presuppositions distort what we see to the extent that 2 observers of the very same facts may differ in every detail of what they recall. This happens to Susan and me all the time. Indeed, Congress resembles a carnival funhouse in some ways, for it's so partisan. The mirrors distort, they compress, they enlarge critical issues that could otherwise be resolved if only they could be observed as they truly are. This was something I'm proud that we did in how we secured freedom for America. We saw the world for what it really was, not as we wished it to be. Narratives. And narratives have replaced reality. Deprecating fictions concerning the establishment of our nation are presented as facts. I told folks the other day, read the Federalist Papers, the Constitution and the Bible, not the 1619 Project. Rather than seek truth, which is hard work, those who seek power demand subservience to stories propagated by disingenuous elites and spewed by unscrupulous politicians enabled by the internet and by social media. I see it every day. The result is a nation separated from truth, but bound by narratives that superficially support the dispossessed. But these narratives actually enrich America's new ruling class, the woke billionaire, the star, the politician, who believe they're entitled to control the lives of others, though they often have trouble controlling their very own. This Politburo of false virtues believes they are smarter than everyone else, but frankly, in their arrogance, this wealthy and privileged group portrays itself to be truly destitute. For no government, no elite, and no authority has ever created prosperity and happiness by making itself lord over men and women who are all born to be free. President Reagan knew this. Another part of vision, another attribute is finding a path forward into the future, a future that cannot be known, but which we must all face. The challenge of a statesman, the challenge of statesmanship is to have the vision to dream of a better, safer world, and the courage, persistence, and patience to turn that dream into reality. Those aren't original words. These words were spoken by Ronald Reagan, and I can't improve on them. But we must observe them. The second virtue is hope. The party, which constitutes our opposition, wants to divide us. They want to drag us down. It has returned to its roots by generating political power through racial discord and exploitation. Through these means, the radicals hope to take from us the joy and pride that everyone in this room tonight has in our country. This they will not do. I told my CIA officers on their first day, I tried to meet with the new class every day they showed up. I told them if you couldn't find joy someplace in your day every day, then you were in the wrong place. Where there is no joy or pride, hope is forfeit. Where there is no hope, the value and the sanctity of life are diminished and may well, in fact, vanish. Look, we know no nation is faultless, but no nation has pondered and tried to correct its faults more than this one, than the United States of America. We are proud. We are proud. We are proud for we are free, but in this realization we are obliged to be incredibly humble. For we know that our strength comes from our obedience to the Lord and the inalienable rights which He bestowed upon each and every one of us. The third virtue is gratitude. It is extended to those who provided our inheritance of both liberty and abundance, which we must every day enlarge and convey to the generation that comes behind us. This is our solemn duty. When we think of gratitude, it is thanks for some past act of kindness that comes to mind. I believe clearly the most powerful form of gratitude, however, is that which is extended into the future, to exist throughout time. Imagine a young infantryman of 17 who died while serving in the Continental Army at Yorktown. What would this boy not have given to be part of America today, to enjoy the plenty and freedom that each of us possesses? We owe it to that young man in liberty who gave his life to America so our country could be born to cherish the values that he bequeathed to us. Imagine, for just a moment, a proud mother of 2 daughters, born into slavery, who perished establishing a new route for the Underground Railroad. What would this courageous woman not have given to see her children raised in freedom and opportunities of today, rather than to the life of burden that she knew? We owe it to all Americans who lived and died under the yoke of oppression, to celebrate what it is we have, to have gratitude. For in doing so, we honor their memory and their many sacrifices. For a nation is not forged in perfection, but evolves according to its people, and of course here in America, according to our principles. Finally, I'd ask you to spend just a moment imagining a Choctaw warrior in 1918, serving in the American Expeditionary Force during the assault on Forest Farm in France. Aware from his elders' oral history of the broken treaties and grievous losses suffered by his people, and knowing that Native Americans could not yet vote in our national election, this incomparably selfless man, nonetheless, used his tribe's unique language to confound the German force before him, becoming one of our nation's first code talkers. This gallant action helped bring victory to an American army. But his deeds, this Choctaw soldier demonstrated that while the past informs the present, it must never be an obstacle to a brighter, more vibrant future. We don't have to imagine great Americans like this. They have existed and they exist today. History is the sum total of all these actions, these decisions, both good and bad. We didn't get it right every day either during our 4 years. Brave and irresolute, our nation must move forward. It cannot be parsed and strained to remove parts that are offensive. For to do so is to rob our past of the richness and complexity that build the road to our present day and the one that will drive us forward. These three stories to which the names of many of our forebears may be applied, represent the giants who formed the foundation upon which this great nation rests. I asked you to imagine what these three persons would not have given to have been part of America of today. Yet I don't believe for 1 second, I don't believe any of them would have given up their place in history if in so doing they would have altered our country's character. These were brave peoples who knew America was great. For as in each of our lives, our sorrows, our joys, our failings, and our accomplishments form what we will become. This is true of our nation as well. Without our belief in a loving God who forgives our sins, who among us would have the moral courage to peer into his or her own heart to discover and to begin to correct the wrongs that America has committed. I suggested the fourth virtue earlier. That fourth virtue is forgiveness, because it's through forgiveness that we advance as a united people. It is truly in the majesty that we observe the course of our republic and the nature of the men and women and who we are as a people. For we're all destined to sin, but we're all blessed with the courage as a nation to acknowledge our sins, to right them, to fight to right them, to overcome what is wrong, to fight to overcome what is wrong, and to reflect on our journey to righteousness, which is forever incomplete, but must forever be a constant. I want to submit to you today that these four virtues must define conservatism and our Republican Party, of which I am so incredibly proud. Indeed, too, when our party does that, it will define America. With intrepidity, we must marshal these qualities to confront extraordinary challenges. Collapse from within is possible. Race and open borders have become levers for the left to sow societal disunity. Immigration without assimilation, illicit drugs, human trafficking, disputed elections, inflationary risk, they've become the tools to disassemble our republic in what must surely be an attempt at national suicide. We allow MS-13 assassins to pass through our borders with gang tattoos covering their faces while we are lectured by our media for our obstinacy. There's a Marxist theoretician. I don't often talk about Marxist theoreticians. His name was Antonio Gramsci. He's an important man in history. He considered freedom servitude. He endeavored to rescue communism by positing that Western values are themselves cultural hegemony. Sound familiar? Western values have brought democratic institutions, technology, and a vast array of achievements to the world. We know this. And while Gramsci died years ago, I have to ask, why are our children being taught his lessons that derive from his invalidation notions in our schools as we sit here today? The histories of our heroes should instead be taught. Men like President Reagan. We must do this so students may comprehend the potential for excellence that exists within every single person. There was a fellow, his name was Dr. Norman Borlaug. I had the privilege to speak in Iowa at an event there celebrating his life. He was born in 1914. He created the Green Revolution. It was President Carter who wrote that Dr. Borlaug did more than any individual in history in the battle to end world hunger. Borlaug invented the high-yield wheat and agriculture practice that are used in Kansas today, and the practices that averted starvation in places like Mexico and India, Pakistan, China, and all throughout Africa. In destitute villages the world over, Norman Borlaug didn't see race, he didn't see religion or color. He asked a simple question: do these people have enough food? In so doing, he saved more lives than any person in history. He received the Nobel Peace Prize, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Gold Medal, and countless accolades all across the world. But today, there is scary mention of Mr. Borlaug in any of our public schools. This is tragic, and this must change. We dwell on our faults as if they were unique and not ubiquitous to every land that's ever existed. When will we teach our children about America's triumphs and our greatness? That answer is that every one of you in our party must make sure that that day is tomorrow. Our country is tearing itself apart. And for what? Anarchy and the elimination of our police can bring but death and fear. Discrimination can't be fought with more discrimination. And the form of socialism that is now being praised by the woke politicians and our billionaires will bring democracy to its knees. It'll bring it to its knees by culling dissenting opinions while concealing harmful biases in search engines and in social media platforms. And if we do not act to secure our elections by demanding voter ID and online manipulation, we will be governed by forces that are beyond our control. Now, I'm sufficiently cynical to always ask the question, who benefits? Well, it's not America, but an array of global interests that has amassed power and unaccountable wealth through their usurpation of the American dream. This was done by selling or commoditizing the engines of our economy. We had whole industries that moved to China. President Trump and I began to stem this tide. We formulated trade policies that brought unmatched numbers of jobs back here home to the United States of America. We established energy independence through regulatory reform, unleashing a massive amount of American dynamism. We addressed intellectual property theft, critical materials and supply chains insecurities. We saved jobs that belong here and must never again be allowed to be stolen by anyone. I know we're not supposed to look backwards at this event, but these last 180 days have been something. This progress that we made has now been countermanded. That's so inconsistent with who we are and must be as a party. China's fusion of business and government has become the model for monopolistic corporations that seek permanent market dominance. Continuous surveillance, uniformity, and indoctrination means stability and growth for the most powerful countries in history. This is the reason why the same entities that exploit slave labor in China, lecture us at home about racism, continue to build their empires. They do it on the backs of slave labor. Do these leaders not hear the cries of Uyghur mothers whose babies are torn from their wombs? You won't read much about it in our press. If our press were indeed fair-minded, it would expose this deceit. But they're owned, and they're bought, and they are silent. When dominant social media platforms can suspend and then ban a president of the United States, there is too much power in too few hands. So how does our party respond? How do we meet this challenge? To change the present course, we must inform our citizens of the threats to liberty, designed to be subtle or unseen, and we must eliminate the constellation of laws and regulations that has granted these corporations almost unlimited and certainly unearned power and wealth. There are some basic precepts, our antitrust laws, Section 230. These are things that will begin to restore freedom inside of our country. Now, I've spoken about this at some length. The People's Republic of China represents an absolute existential threat to our country. And whether the virus that savaged the world came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology or not, the Communist Party of China's allowance of international travel from that city, while permitting almost no internal travel from that source, is an absolutely unpardonable act. Our party must lead the way in demanding concrete answers concerning the origin of the virus that has caused such immense suffering and death. China nearly possesses the combination of wealth, strength, and population required to unseat the United States as the most powerful nation on earth. For an awfully long time, we counted on our military and other forms of power to maintain our preeminence. But these attributes are now in question. The Chinese Navy has ascended. China has stolen $1 trillion in technology from the United States. The extent of this theft has enabled dramatic increases in the lethality of their arms. And so while we still hold an edge across all of our services, we must fundamentally improve our military procurement system and our means of technical education here in our schools at home, or our superiority may well vanish. I've seen this up close running that enormous bureaucracy we call our State Department. Waste, politics, irresolution, they have no place inside of these bureaucracies. Our procurement processes, certainly at most of the government, but deeply inside the Department of Defense, are marked by the development of weapon systems that produced an inadequate number of weapons, and weapons that were canceled before a single operational unit is fielded. This is frankly done to fool the public into believing that a new administration is saving money, when in fact the opposite is true. I must say that both parties stand guilty of this. In this century, tens of billions of dollars have been wasted. New tanks, dear to my heart, new tanks, howitzers, and helicopters canceled by the military branch in which I serve demonstrate this issue's enormity. Our weapons are only of use if we actually field them and put them in the hands of our amazing young men and women. The answer, and our party will have to leave this, is to tackle these big bureaucracies and create incentive-based restructuring of our defense and security procurement systems. We can't be apathetic. We have to make these changes to move forward. We must eliminate entire levels of bureaucracy. We should start with an office known. We should start with an enormous bureaucracy known as the Office of Secretary of Defense. I mean no harm to anyone who served there. It has now become politicized. I observe these things so close at hand at the Department of State. These institutions are bloated, they're unwieldy. I was accused of not protecting jobs at the State Department, and I was only saddened that I didn't get rid of more. I was operating in an environment that was unionized. I operated in an environment that was blatantly woke and dominated by the left. These bureaucracies must be brought to heel, because they must serve. And to be strong, we must never politicize or indoctrinate our military. We can't permit this to happen. We must enhance our alliances all across the world. We worked so hard to build coalitions that defeated ISIS and a big group called the Quad to push back on China. We did this alongside friends like Australia and Japan and India. You know, even before COVID, our media, our popular culture, our universities, and our international businesses had been forces for democratic development and market creation throughout the globe. But I must say this is no longer universally true. Today, China has infiltrated Hollywood and academia, our technology companies, and the conglomerates that control America's media publishing. Our strength, freedom, has been turned against us. Communist influence must be eliminated in our country, root and branch. This is something President Reagan knew. We began this work. It's why I shuttered something called Confucius Institutes that were at our universities, designating them as foreign missions. It's why I closed this crazy thing that the Chinese called the consulate in Houston, which was actually a den of spies. We must be fearless. We must be fearless, and our party must lead this. We must be fearless in imposing proportionate costs on Beijing. Strength is what China understands, and today we're showing little of it. You know, China constructed its first overseas base in a place called Djibouti not too long ago. From that nation's location near southern approach to the Suez Canal, the Chinese Navy can affect our trade. Coupled with other regional redoubts, China, for the first time in history, is positioning itself as a global military power. And most crucially, China is empowering Iran, having inaugurated a multi-decade strategic partnership. Can anyone explain why we're sitting at a table with them in Vienna? You know, through this compact, we may be viewed as part of China's new imperialism known as the Belt and Road Initiative. The risk is treacherous. Terrorism, disintegration in the Middle East, support the interests of both Beijing and Tehran, as well as the interests of Moscow. Because frankly, for China, terrorism instigated by Iran diverts American military capabilities. Iran's active nuclear weapons program compounds this danger and has been supported surreptitiously by China for decades. For Iran, its ties to the East constitute an invaluable source of technology, stolen first from the United States and then transferred from China to them. And China, too, represents a secure market for the oil that could otherwise be subject to embargo, where resurgent Iran now has a free hand to set loose the terrorists who constitute Hamas and Hezbollah. In just this short time, the administration has removed sanctions that we imposed to restart negotiations to limit what Iran will never willingly limit, its nuclear weapons program. This militant state threatens not only Israel and the world energy supplies, but the Arab states of the Gulf. We saw Hamas' recent assault on Israel. This would not have occurred if America's support for the Jewish state had not been altered by ambiguous statements and outreach to Israel's enemies. As we look forward, we need to remember what President Reagan did and what President Trump and I recognize too. America's relationship with Israel must be absolutely unshakable. If America, thank you, if America and Israel act as one, if America and Israel act as one, the opponents of peace understand they will never attain victory. You know, before our administration, the status of Jerusalem always had been a diplomatic chess piece. Look at my predecessor's travels. All fine people, but how many times can you go from Jerusalem to Ramallah and back and not realize that this simply isn't going to work? We knew it. And so the eternal capital of the Jewish people became the home for the United States Embassy. Our decisive action there demonstrated determination. In doing so, it removed a key obstacle, which allowed the Abraham Accords to move forward. This saw 4 amazing leaders in 4 amazing Muslim-majority nations make a real peace with Israel. We, too, had American energy dominance absolutely at the center of how we thought about our foreign policy because it was critical to our efforts to ensuring peace and security in the Middle East. We have the amazing means the Lord has blessed us to be a net energy exporter of fossil fuels and advanced fission power plants. Sadly, the production of American energy is now being dismembered. It's being dismembered on an altar of radical environmentalism. Does the left not know that a combination of fossil fuels and nuclear power is literally the only means to provide enough energy and clean water and sanitation for many cities in Africa now experiencing exploding growth that can last for them throughout this next century? There is no alternative. By 2100, many of the nation's most populous countries and cities will be in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. It will comprise over 700 million people. And if energy supplies are inadequate, war, pestilence, extremism, and exodus will inevitably be the result, and it will come to the United States of America. Renewable sources of energy can only be supplementary, for their production, of course, is intermittent. And defacing once beautiful landscape, the blades of colossal windmills in states like mine in Kansas with wind farms eviscerates countless birds and the greatness of our nation. And even as our national symbol is not spared by these windmills, we know the real risk. Is this the line that environmentalism wants to draw? The line that it promised our country? Conservatives know that this is not the case. We know how to get safe drinking water and clean air. We've always been great stewards of our lands. We know this is true. We know new threats to America arise often. We've seen pandemics. We've seen genetic engineering on the rise. We've seen the effects of cyber warfare, power grid disruptions. We know what happens when artificial intelligence is in the hands of our adversaries. In the coming months, I'll speak to each of these issues at great length and how conservatives should respond to those threats. But as I said earlier, vision. Vision matters. Vision is the key to meeting these and other challenges. Ronald Reagan, Mikhail Gorbachev established the foundations for International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. You remember this? It doesn't get talked about much. It was done back in 1985. That seems like a long time ago, and for you young people, it seems like forever. This facility is now being built. This project will explore the production of fusion energy. And if successful, Ronald Reagan's vision, his vision, it will bring to this century the sun's power to our planet. Truly clean energy. Truly clean energy will actually exist in infinite supply. It required vision and imagination. He understood that this was exceptionalism. And since today, in our government, we find little of this type of prescience and grit, we must take back the House and the Senate and the presidency. We must win elections. And as a native of California, there's a governorship I'd like to see us get to. I want to close with a poem because you know all I'm such a great poet. This is a poem called The Ruin. It was written more than 1,000 years ago, and it records the remnants of Roman Britain. Roman Britain had been built centuries before that, but lost to time. The poem reads as follows. This masonry is wondrous. Fates broke it. Courtyard pavements were smashed. The work of giants is decaying. This must never be the future of America. Events may have pushed our nation into a furnace, but the book of Daniel tells us. The book of Daniel tells us the people of faith cannot be harmed by such a test. And so, with hands on our hearts, we will turn this glowing furnace into a forge. Within it, we will form our rendezvous with destiny. We will renew the dream. We will honor the past. We will chart a brave path forward. For in so doing, we will light the way. We will light the way for the entire world, just as President Reagan would have had it. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Mr. Secretary, what a remarkable speech. Thank you so much for coming to the Reagan Library. As you know, as you mentioned, Ronald Reagan succeeded in a great many things. One of them, no doubt about it, he'll be known for, is his help, which brought an end to the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall. Our MC tonight, Ben Sutton, mentioned that you were kind enough to come to Berlin about a year and a half ago to unveil this statue. But truth be known, Berlin is somewhat of a liberal city. We've been trying for many years to get a statue of Ronald Reagan placed there, as it is in capitals throughout the world. Tough problem, couldn't make it happen. Secretary Pompeo not only unveiled this great statue of Ronald Reagan in Berlin, he made it happen. He placed it on the roof. He placed it at the very roof of the United States Embassy in Berlin for all to see. And for that tonight, Secretary, we'd like to have a maquette leave with you, a maquette of Ronald Reagan, of the Berlin statue of Ronald Reagan for all to see. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this